Number 1. A country trick-or-treat. I grew up in a much different environment than I live in right now. In fact, right now, I live in a huge metropolitan area. I grew up living on a ridge in Ohio. It was a much different way of life. I mean, here, we're surrounded by people. The houses on the ridge and the surrounding hills were not so close. On Halloween, when the trick-or-treaters are out in my current neighborhood, there are kids going door to door, everywhere. Where I grew up, while we could have driven into town to go trick-or-treating, we also did so on the ridge. This might seem weird to some people, but we got into the bed of the pickup truck, and our parents would drive us from house to house. Throughout my neighborhood, this was the way that I always experienced Halloween. When my older brother was 14, my parents let him drive the pickup truck around the area. Again, this was not so unusual for the time in the area. Even growing up, I was driving before I got my license, but that's another story. Having my brother drive made their life a lot easier, because he would drive us younger kids around so that my parents did not have to. So, I was 12 this year. My younger brother that went with us was 9, and my best friend at the time was a boy named Kenny. We loaded up in the back of the truck, and my brother took us out. The area was large, but even though the houses were pretty spread out, most of the adults knew each other, and we all knew which houses were trick-or-treat houses. We had hit a lot of the houses that we knew, and by this time it was dark. And when it got dark out on the ridge, it really got dark. My brother was not used to driving in the dark either. Still, he was a bit intoxicated with his newfound freedom, and once we had gone to all the trick-or-treat houses that our parents had approved for us to go to, he wasn't ready to go home. He wanted to drive around some more. So, like an idiot, he decided to go further out into the hills. I remember the road we went on like it was yesterday. It was very, very dark, and it was very, very slim. The meager light from the headlights created a very narrow area of light directly in front of the truck. The road was also getting overgrown with trees. More than once, tree branches scraped up against the side of the truck. Now, imagine what it was like for us 3 boys. My brother was in the cab, but we were sitting in the bed. It was dark and getting chilly outside. We were also so young that we were still pretty scared of the dark. I knocked on the back window of the cab several times, trying to get my brother's attention. Each time he waved me off. I guess he knew I was wanting to ask him to turn around, but he couldn't turn around. Looking back, I also think that he was pretty scared at this point. He couldn't turn around, and he had no idea how far this long and lonely country road was going to go. Finally, after what seemed like forever, we came to the end of the road. Unfortunately, the end was a gate that led into a long driveway. At the end of the driveway was a really, really small and old house. There was only one light in one of the windows. My brother got out of the car and tried to see if he could open the gate. It was locked, so he came back to us and told us he was going to go up alone to the house and see if the owner could open the gate so we could turn around. He told us to wait there. We were terrified about being left alone, but he insisted. He gave me his pocket knife and then jumped the fence. We really couldn't see him as he went up to the house. We were sitting there in the dark, terrified by every sound, every minor noise. A few minutes passed, and nothing happened. But then, suddenly, we heard a gunshot. All three of us screamed and started crying. We thought my brother had been shot. I jumped out of the bed and made my way over to the gate. I then saw my brother running back to the gate. Well, limping back to the gate, actually, but very fast. I have never before, nor since, seen the kind of fear in his eyes that I did that day. He picked me up, and he forced all three of us into the cab. He rolled the windows up and made us lock the doors. Then, strangely enough, he started driving in reverse. We tried to get him to tell us what happened, but he refused. He told us he had to concentrate on the road, because driving backwards was not something he ever had to do for so long. Hell, it probably took us over an hour to finally get back to the main road. When we finally turned around, he immediately sped back home. My dad chewed my brother out big time. But no one told us what happened at the house. It wasn't until years later that he finally told me. He had gone up to the house, and the door was answered by an enormous hillbilly. The man's hands were covered in blood. My brother naturally assumed that he was just preparing some animal meat. But he was very angry at my brother's presence. He refused to open the gate, and when my brother asked again, he went and grabbed his shotgun. My brother tripped down the stairs, which was why he was limping. While he was running back, the guy fired off the shotgun. He didn't know if he was shooting at him or in the air, but he obviously didn't get hit. After being yelled at by our father, my dad refused to call the police. He just told my brother he knew who the guy was, and that the police wouldn't do anything about it. And that's all I know. My father passed away and never told us anything about it again. But I think it's pretty scary, wondering what that man was up to. Why he was so adamant that my brother leave. Why he wouldn't open the gate to facilitate that leaving. And why the police wouldn't do anything about it. Number 2. Out of candy. Yeah, I know Halloween is supposed to be a time where people play pranks on each other. People get kicks out of scaring other people. But what I think is that this can be rather dangerous. I guess it's really hard to know whether or not someone is joking around, or they're using the holiday to cover up their real behavior. Now here's what I mean. When I was a teenager, I stopped trick-or-treating very late. I went out as late as 15 years old. So that being the case, when I was an adult and living at home, I always gave candy out to everyone, regardless of how old they were. I had a big bowl of candy the year this happened, but the trick-or-treaters came out in force. I'd never seen so many children. I thank God I had gotten so much candy. By the time I had given out my last piece, the crowd had mostly dispersed. There were just a few kids here and there. I turned out my porch light, and then went and made myself a bowl of popcorn. I was going to watch a scary movie, or at least something that I considered to be a scary movie. I won't mention what I was going to watch, because people will probably tease me for being too wussy. But anyway, I sat down, and about 5 minutes into the movie, someone rang my doorbell. I figured it could only be trick-or-treaters. I thought turning off my porch light would have been enough of a sign to let them know I had run out of candy. So I got up and walked over to the door, turned on the porch light, and opened the door. I was a bit surprised when I noticed 4 teenage boys standing outside the door, and they were dressed just like the Droogs from A Clockwork Orange. And yes, I had to look up the name of the gang. I was familiar with the movie, but not that familiar. The boy dressed as Alex put out his bag and said, "Trick or treat," in a very sinister sounding voice. I paused for a moment. I can't really even tell you why, but for some reason, I couldn't respond right away. I was impressed by their costumes, but that was not why I paused. I couldn't even tell why. After the pause, rather than tell the teenagers I was out of candy, I told them to please hold on for a moment. I went back out to my cabinet and I got a package of full-size Snicker bars out. These weren't Halloween candy, of course, just something I kept for myself for a snack. I came back and gave each boy a bar. They looked a bit surprised at getting such a good candy bar, I guess. They exchanged some very odd glances. They looked a bit surprised at getting such a good candy bar, I guess. They exchanged some very odd glances, and then thanked me for the candy. Then they left. I went back and watched my movie. I'm not really sure how much time had passed, but after a while, I thought I heard something on my porch. It wasn't someone knocking on the door, or anything like that. It sounded like someone was on my stairs, though. I got up and walked over to the door. I turned on the porch light and looked out the window. I caught a slight glimpse of those 4 teenage boys running away. I don't know why, but I opened the door and looked out on the porch. There was a note taped to my door. I nearly dropped it when I read what it said. "You're lucky. You found extra candy. We were gonna kill the first person who had run out. We saw your lights off and figured that was you." I reported to the police. They assured me that it was likely just the boys trying to scare me. It was Halloween after all. But you know, how could I really ever be sure? Their costumes were so good. Maybe they really wanted to act the parts out. Number 3. The Dare House. What's Halloween without a little bit of fun and trying to scare your friends? When you're younger, it is all about candy and costumes. But when you grow out of that, it turns into a way to razz each other. At least, that's how I always saw it. When I was 14 years old, I wasn't ready to stop trick-or-treating. But I had just gotten into high school and became a member of a cool group of friends. They made it clear, pretty early on, to me, that we were too old to act like kids anymore. I remember my mom asking me that year what I wanted to be for Halloween. She wasn't too happy when I told her I'd rather just hang out with my friends. My dad, however, seemed to understand, and he gave me permission to go hang out with them. He didn't tell my mom this, but he even told me I could stay out later than curfew since it was Halloween. So me and my 4 best friends went walking around the neighborhood. A couple of the guys went to make fun of the kids trick-or-treating. I wasn't really into doing that because I really wanted to be out there doing it with them. We went out past the houses and spent some time walking around the graveyard. That didn't last very long, though. There were some even older teenagers there, and they made it clear to us pretty early on that we weren't welcome. So we headed out. And when we were really bored, my friend Jeff had a great idea. There was an old school building on the edge of town that the kids in the neighborhood all considered to be haunted. We decided to go and sneak into the yard. The building itself was not huge, at least not compared to the current school building at the time. When a new high school was built about 10 years before, The elementary school was moved into the old high school. That left the building empty. It then just sat empty for years, with kids sneaking in and things like that. We of course believed it was haunted, just because kids always seemed to think that abandoned buildings were haunted. But although the building wasn't huge, it was definitely scary. It was right out of town, so it was dark. It had boarded and broken windows, and it had plenty of no trespassing signs as well. Once we got into the yard, though, our courage failed. All of us pretended like we weren't scared of going in there, but we knew we were. And we knew each other knew it as well. We began accusing each other of being scared in order to hide our own fear. So we dared each other. And eventually, my friend Jeff was the one who took the dare. We all went to the back of the building and found a broken back door. Jeff went in. The dare was that he had to go to the second floor and wave at us from the window, so we knew he went further into the building. So he went in. And we watched. And we waited. And we watched. And we waited. I don't know how much time passed, but pretty soon, it seemed like more than enough time had passed for him to get upstairs. But still, we waited. And still, he neither showed up at the top floor and he didn't come back. About an hour and a half passed before we began to really get scared that something had happened. We couldn't call our parents or the police because we'd get in really big trouble. So we had to suck up our fear and go into the school on our own. The four of us left went into the school as a group. If we were scared to go in alone before, we were more scared now. The building was scary. There was trash and crap everywhere. Tons of bottles and cigarette butts all over the place and plenty of graffiti. And it was dark. We checked around, then tried to find the stairs once we realized Jeff was not on the first floor. We found the steps and went up them. Jeff was laying down right at the top of the staircase, bruised, bloody, and unconscious. We didn't know what had happened, but we were scared out of our minds. We managed to bring him to, at least enough that we could sort of carry him down the stairs and out of the building. We were frightened that whomever had done this to him was going to get us before we could get out. Once we were off the property, though, we were about to call the police, but Jeff had come to, and he forbade us from doing it. He just begged to come over to my house to clean up. He didn't want to get in trouble, and he knew if he called the cops, he would get bitched out by his parents. At first, he wouldn't tell us what happened, but when he finally did, it didn't really answer many questions. He was attacked from behind when he made it to the top of the stairs. Next thing he knew, we were trying to revive him. He never saw who or what attacked him. He refused to even get the authorities involved. He had bruises, but he just told his parents he was attacked by a school bully, and he wouldn't name the bully. If anything, that old school building had a much scarier reputation afterward, and we're pretty sure that whoever attacked Jeff was still in the building when we were exploring it, and we're pretty sure he was still there long afterwards. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope that you're all having a very happy Halloween. I'm going to spend the day taking it easy and watching some scary movies. It's what I do every year. You can read the print version of these stories on the Killer Orange Cat subreddit, and visit the Killer Orange Cat merchandise store at the links included in the description. I want to make sure that everyone is updated about the Bloody Mary challenge video. I didn't forget about it, and I will be doing it. Because of things going on in my personal life, I haven't been able to do it before Halloween. It will be coming up probably towards the end of November though. But if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or use the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave some comments to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. My only requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, especially on Halloween, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.